Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're back with perhaps my favorite legendary lord, definitely in the top 5, and the true Everchosen of multiplayer at the very least, Sarthorael the Everwatcher. We're going to be taking a look at a handful of battles today. I've got 3 that I want to show you guys. First one, we're going to be taking on the Proud Dawi, so let's go ahead and take a look at the army compositions. We've got Sarthorael the Everwatcher. He's got Plague of Rust, Transmutation of Lead. Plague of Rust, of course, is a great armor debuff, minus 30, or if you overcast, minus 60 for relatively cheap. Transmutation of Lead is a very large area of effect debuff to melee attack and weapon damage. Since the dwarves generally don't have that good of melee attack anyway, it's a very good debuff to negate their offensive power in melee. For infantry, we've got a mix of Chaos Marauders and Chosen, 2 Chosen. I have been liking the shield units quite a bit, especially when you combine with Sarthorael and the Weird Spawn, who I've also brought here, the Regiment of Renowned Chaos Spawn with their armor sundering. You can really get some awesome synergy out of these guys. We've also got the Mirror Guard for another sword and board option, very cost effective. We've also got 2 units of Chaos Chariots. Chariots are kind of making a comeback against the dwarves. They're not cure-all by any means, but they are definitely good against the dwarves, I think. And we've also got some Poison Warhounds to chase down routing units. And you can see we've also got a vanguard of Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes. So for the dwarves, we've got a front line of Dwarf Warriors mixed with Longbeards with great weapons. We've got a second line of Ulthuar's Raiders, some Rangers, and more Rangers with great weapons on the side, 2 Orkin Guns, and the Dragonback Slayers. You can see my opponent's deployed here so as to kind of take advantage of this terrain piece here, so that it's going to be hard for me to get a flanking maneuver here. If I do come up into this area, it's basically just going to become a kill zone for all these Rangers and, you know, so on. I guess they're all Rangers, but Rangers and Rangers with great weapons. And yeah, let's get the battle rolling and we'll see how things go. So the one issue my opponent is going to face is, well, number 1, organ guns don't have that great of range, and number 2, this map is not great for artillery. This is actually the Wintertooth Crown map. I believe it's one of Throg's quest battles. It recently came out with the recent patch, and it is, as you will see, not great for direct line of sight artillery. There's quite a bit of terrain here. There's this massive hill and kind of these divots in between with some other forests and other hills and so on behind. You can see we've maneuvered my Marauder Horsemen up here, one of them hidden in the woods, this other one going to be throwing in some cheeky axes from the side. We got these Marauder Horsemen up and behind the hill here, using this terrain for cover from these units. And yeah, you can see the organ guns having a hard time getting an open line of sight. I'm going to run Big Bird in here just as a distraction, so my opponent will have something to shoot at and he won't try and shoot it. You know, like say he's a Marauder Horseman. A little bit of friendly fire there. A bit unfortunate for the dwarves. Someone's definitely taking the Slayer Oath, but yeah, I'm perfectly fine to let my opponent shoot at Big Bird because, of course, he has very heavy missile resistance, and this is what makes him perhaps the most competitive lord for Chaos. I actually think he's better than Kolek in a multitude of matchups. His heavy missile resistance of 60%, he also has magic resistance of 25%, so against elite kind of magic missiles like Sisters of Avalorn, Silver Bullets, things like that. He's going to be very resistant. Warp Lightning Cannons, all of that jazz is going to be very hard to do damage to Sarthorael. He's also unbreakable, and Lore of Metal is a pretty solid lore. Actually has some really nice tools. But yeah, you can see these 2 Marauder Horsemen up on the hill here have a commanding position to fire down into these unfortunate Dawi who are going to take some nasty losses here. Some great HP damage, and yeah, over half HP damage already, actually. Big Bird, again, just running around here. He does actually get marked by Ulthar, which is going to lower his missile resistance, which is puts it down to only 38%, which means he is actually going to start to take some damage here. So I pull back. The mainline force is almost in position to engage. So yeah, we're going to get things rolling here. You can see the Marauders and the Mirror Guard, man, especially in the snow. Those Mirror Guard really look swell, but these Chaos Spawn also going to be charging downhill. We're going to try and get them in on the Longbeards because they're obviously a high-value target. And we're also going to drop that Plague of Rust in just a moment. Looks like it has been dropped, and those Longbeards down to only 10 armor. And they're just getting mashed on by the Chaos Spawn and the Mirror Guard there. We also dropped massive Transmutation of Lead, hitting all the units in this pocket. That's the one thing about Transmutation of Lead. Another benefit against the dwarves is its large area of effect means that you can usually hit most of a dwarf front line. Big Bird coming in here, trying to apply some fear and terror to some of the lower tier units. Obviously, Longbeards are immune to psychology, but we can perhaps rout away some of these other lower tier units. Big Bird's also going to be pretty decent at taking out these lower armor rangers. You can see the Chosen charging downhill, axes out. These guys are all kinds of hyped up on Chaos Fury, and Big Bird as well leading the way, getting a nice charge in there, interrupting the retreat of those rangers. And then the Chosen are going to get in this back line here as well. And yeah, Chosen will just absolutely cut Rangers to shreds. I mean, there's no hope for them. Oh, we've got the Chariots up on the hill, just kind of keeping them in reserve until the right moment. It does look like we're going to be bringing them up and around. The Marauder Horsemen just in a commanding position up on the hill. Again, just throwing into the rear here. Managed to rout off one Longbeard, moving our attention to the next one here. These Mirror Guard and the Marauders are going to start to wrap up the flank. I decide that I really don't want these Rangers online, so we're going to interrupt them in melee with the Marauders here. Then Big Bird going to get in the back line. He's just been running around like a true troll, and because of his attack animations, I mean, he has wings. He can't really fly, but he can kind of hover in a way. Like a lot of his charge animations, he flaps around a bit, and oh man, somebody's going for a ride there. But yeah, he flaps around a bit. He's really hard to pin down, especially for the dwarves who, you know, obviously don't have any high mass units. Can be very tricky. The Chariots have come in, got a nice charge. They're going to come around and now charge into these Rangers as well. The Grumbling Guard trying to respond here, but at this point the Dawi front line's just getting overrun. There's Chosen, Weird Spawn still just mashing up things here, and Longbeards with weapons starting to get rolled up a little bit. Another massive transmutation of lead in the back line, just debuffing all these Rangers and everything, most of whom are going to be at 0 melee attacks. They're going to struggle to do any damage whatsoever, especially with the Chosen having 120 armor. But yeah, going to be very tough for the Dawi. See the balance of power very heavily in our favor at this point. A lot of units getting terrified, and just a general chain route going down. And yeah, Big Bird's going to be able to carry the day here. He has taken quite a bit of damage, but of course he is unbreakable, and that's one of the other things that makes him super competitive, is that he's unbreakable, so he'll never rout, despite how low he gets on HP, and he does have quite a bit of HP as well. Just overall, very strong character. So we'll fast forward a little bit through this late game here, as there is some more I want to show you guys. Everyone's going to shatter but Ungrim here, and we're going to have to grind him down in melee. So yeah, he's making his last stand here, having his armor sundered by the Weird Spawn, getting circle beaten by Chosen, and now Mirror Guard, and Big Bird's going to drop that Plague of Rust and come in here and finish the job himself. You can see Ungrim down to only 30 armor with all that armor sundering effect going on. So yeah, Big Bird's going to get in here, and wherever Ungrim went, oh, there he is. Yeah, he's going to get finished off here, unfortunately. So victory for the forces of chaos, and no doubt another grudging. Oh man, Ungrim's still alive. Somehow. But yeah, we're going to be taking a look at another battle just after this one finishes. I thought it was almost done there. Okay, there we go. Now Ungrim's gone. Very fun stuff. In terms of the breakdown, just briefly here, I mean, obviously the Chosen with Grey Weapons that got into the back, or not Chosen with Grey Weapons, just regular Chosen rather. These guys that got into the back line just absolutely cut up the Rangers. Not really sure about the role of just regular Rangers against Chaos. I think you probably want to take AP missiles instead. The Rangers with Grey Weapons are decent, but they do have relatively short range, and the organ guns were a pretty significant investment that didn't end up paying out. Likewise, these Longbeards with Grey Weapons just got mashed by Weird Spawn, the armor sundering of Sarthorael, and the Mirror Guard, and even the Marauders doing relatively well in the front line. Marauder Horsemen also being very aggressive as well. So yeah, worked out pretty well. Let's go on to the next one here. So this one, I'm going to be kind of doing a callback to my previous video about High Elf Heavy Cavalry against the Dark Elves. We're going to be facing the Dark Elves again today, and yeah, we're going to bring some Chaos Knights with Lances. These guys are very strong against the Dark Elves. My opponent, as you can see, didn't really bring too many tools to deal with them. I am going to be doing some videos about how to deal with heavy cavalry as the Dark Elves, but in general, we've got 4 units of Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes just to do plenty of skirmishing. 2 Chaos Knights with lances. The core is going to be Chaos Marauders with the Mirror Guard in the center. We've also got the Summoners of Rage, an insanely powerful regiment of renown. The anti-large armor piercing, magic attacks, good melee defense, decent charge bonus. A lot to like about those guys. My opponent, he's got Malekith up on a dragon, front lines Hargonite Executioners and Bleak Swords, 2 Dark Shards, a single Reaper Bolt Thrower, and a unit of Dread Spears with 4 Dark Riders, some with shields, some without. So, yeah. You can see from the timer this battle is relatively short. Basically just wanted to show you guys Chaos Knights in this matchup and talk a little bit about Big Bird here. So the reason I bring Big Bird is obviously the Dark Elves do have some pretty potent armor-piercing missiles, and beyond that, I find that Big Bird's actually a bit more escapable. Like he has an easier time escaping from somebody like Crone Hellebron, for example. The other thing too is with Hellebron, if your opponent ends up bringing her on the cart, you then have the Overcast Plague of Rust to be able to sunder her armor significantly so that your troops can do a lot more damage. Granted, he does do magic damage, so he's not going to be that great against the Crone 1v1 in melee, obviously, but yeah, you can see him taking a shot there. But yeah, we're going to drop that Plague of Rust on those Hargonite Executioners as they fight the Mirror Guard. Should be pretty cost effective for us. These Chaos Knights with Lances just completely collapsed those Dark Riders there. And yeah, it's going to be pretty rough. No weird spawn this time, as I was a little bit concerned about missiles, and I wanted to go very heavy on the Marauders with throwing axes. That way, if my opponent did bring the Crone, we could try and kite a little bit and not just go in a straight up rush. But you can see a brutal rear charge coming in from the Chaos Knights. At that point, my opponent admits defeat, probably a little bit prematurely. I mean, Malekith was still pretty healthy. He was getting hit by throwing axes, but these Chaos Knights with Lances, 100 kills, barely got touched, just completely destroyed 2 units of Dark Riders with shields, and yeah, it was turning out pretty rough for my opponent, but I still think he quit out a little bit early. But yeah, Big Bird against the Dark Elves, I think, is the best pick in that matchup as well. Probably against the High Elves, too, because of Sisters of Avalor now, and that's what we're going to take a look at next. So my opponent didn't bring a caster this time, which is definitely not advisable. You definitely want to bring Lore of Life, especially if you're going to be taking the Fireborn, or at the very least Lore of High Magic. But yeah, I also kind of wanted to show this one off because of the Regiment of Renown Hell Cannon, which number 1 is just awesome looking, and number 2 is incredibly powerful because it's more accurate and has a better refire rate because it's a Regiment of Renown. It's an insanely powerful unit. It also does magic damage, so it's actually going to be pretty decent against Dragon Princes. And yeah, my opponent did bring some Sisters of Avalorn here, so I'm definitely glad I've got Big Bird, because of course these guys with their missiles, they do armor piercing, but they also do magic damage as well. So their magic missile damage is not going to do a whole lot against Big Bird, so I'm not too worried about that. Altogether, typically I'm not too worried when my opponent doesn't bring a caster, but not to denigrate my opponent or make fun of him in any way. I have forgotten to bring a caster plenty of times, but yeah, it's pretty much always advisable to bring a spellcaster. We're going to lead these Fireborn on a little bit of a wild goose chase here, and then bring in these Summoners of Rage to deal with them. The Fireborn, if they got a clean charge on the Summoners of Rage, might be able to take them. I actually kind of want to test that to see at some point, but yeah, they're going to try and retreat here, but we're going to use the Marauder Horsemen to tie some of them up in melee, and then the Summoners of Rage should be able to finish them off here. Big Bird, not really too concerned about him. The rest of my infantry all have shields as well. Very similar build to before, lots of shielded Marauders, Chaos Warriors instead of Chosen. You can see the Fireborn coming in for a rear charge, but I mean, they're pretty much done for already. Dragon comes down to try and deal with the cannon, but we're going to drop an Overcast Plague of Rust here, and immediately swing back with these Mirror Guard to start dealing with it. The crew was knocked off briefly here, but we're going to get back on station. Over here, this unit of Dragon Princes is taking quite a few shots from the Hell Cannon and some shots from the Marauder Horsemen, who they've mostly dealt with, but yeah, you can see Sisters of Avalorn shooting at Chaos Marauders. Probably not the most cost-effective trade in the world, but at the end of the day, I mean, my opponent's got to shoot at something, and it's already not looking great. Fireborn have been routed off. I mean, there still are quite a few Swordmasters of Hoeth and these Regiment of Renown Spearmen as well. But once the Weird Spawn get in here and get a hold of those Swordmasters, we can also drop that Overcast Plague of Rust, bringing them down to 0 armor, because Swordmasters have 90 base. But yeah, Summoners of Rage dealing with the rest of the Dragon Princes quite easily. And at this point, my opponent's going to use his missiles to shoot at the Summoners of Rage, which is a very good target for the Sisters of Avalorn. We're going to drop a Transmutation of Lead here, and the Summoners of Rage also, of course, have their Bound Chain Lightning that we're going to drop in the front line here. Which does a ton of damage, and it looks like just the Transmutation of Lead, so no Plague of Rust quite yet on those Swordmasters, but Dragon trying to contest the backline here. Meanwhile, the Regiment of Renown Hell Cannon shooting at these Lothar and Seaguard. Probably should be shooting at the Sisters of Avalorn instead, but at this point they're not honestly doing that much damage. They are shooting at these Summoners of Rage, but at the end of the day, the Summoners of Rage are moving around. They're honestly not taking a whole lot, or maybe they're shooting at the Mirror Guard. The Mirror Guard are actually taking quite a bit of damage, but yeah, these Swordmasters of Hoeth definitely in a rough place. And we're going to drop another Overcast Plague of Rust on this dragon here. And with the weird spawn, the dragon should be at pretty much 0 armor. Let's see if it has both effects. So, Plague of Rust, it looks like the armor sundering not quite proccing. Oh, there we go. Now he's down to 0 armor. So, yeah, all these non-armor piercing attacks doesn't matter. The full damage will still be getting through as long as it bypasses the melee defense. At this point, the entire backline has mostly been compromised. We're going to do a nice magical alpha strike here. Sacrifice these Marauder Horsemen with the Hell Cannon shot, followed up by Searing Doom here, which generates great value against a light armor units like Sisters of Avalorn, and then another Hell Cannon shot, and that's pretty much finished off the entire unit almost in one go. And with that, the High Elf forces are going to shatter. So, well played to my opponents, all 3 of them. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. 3 quick fire games with Big Bird, who I definitely think is the most competitive choice in most matchups for Chaos. There are a handful where Kolek is probably better, but I think that there's an argument to be made for Sigvald and Archaon in a couple. But I think that Big Bird is going to be your best pick in most matchups. In this particular battle, obviously, both the Regiment of Renown, Hell Cannon, and the Summoners of Rage paying out very well. Weird Spawn also doing very well, helping to sunder the armor in the front line there. Marauder Horsemen led those Blood Knights, sorry, not Blood Knights, Dragon Princes on a Wild Goose Chase, and definitely got some good value there. But yeah, my opponent obviously not bringing a casters, pretty rough, but his build overall a little bit narrow. Chaos can definitely go pretty wide with lots of Marauders and Hounds and things, and he invested in some missile units that didn't end up, he wasn't able to protect them in the end. I mean, obviously, we didn't really get a mobility win per se, but the Regiment of Renown Hell Cannon he didn't have an answer for. The Hell Cannon, because it's a relatively large unit model, it is vulnerable to something like an Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, counter artillery firing it, because it's a big unit model and it only has the 1 cannon. If you destroy it, that's it, right? So it can be countered by things like cannons, bolt throwers, things like that, but my opponent unfortunately didn't bring any. So let's just kind of quickly summarize here with Big Bird and kind of talk about some final thoughts here. So with the Warriors of Chaos, obviously Sarthorael the Everwatcher, aka Big Bird. In terms of his abilities, I didn't end up showing it here, but he does have access to Final Transmutation, of course. I like this one quite a bit against factions that can't bring a regenerating Lord or any healing, like the Greenskins, for example. It's really strong at Lord sniping, can also do a ton of damage to a big blob, and could potentially be useful in some other matchups as well. Skaven is another one that comes to mind where this could potentially be useful, although against the Skaven you may want to take more of the area of effect damage spells to help clear out chaff. Transmutation of Lead, you guys got to saw. Glittering Robe is okay. I typically don't tend to bring it as Chaos, just because most of your units are relatively well armored anyway, so it's not really that useful, but like for Balthazar Gelt, for example, it can be useful for Empire State Troops. Gehenna's Golden Hounds, it's an okay Vortex. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good against low armor factions. Again, Skaven is one matchup where I might bring this. Plague of Rust is useful in almost any matchup. It's just such a strong ability. It's so cheap, and it procs the Lore of Metal lore attribute, which is metal shifting, 10% AP and weapon damage map wide. And of course, Searing Doom is a nice cost-effective bombardment, especially if you're going to be facing high-value, low armor units, like against any of the elf factions. Let's see, Beastmen potentially could be good, Skaven as well, Greenskins. I mean, there's a multitude of matchups where Searing Doom is going to be good. So very cost-effective spell, and Lore Metal overall, it's not the best lore magic, but combined with Sarthorael's other attributes, it makes him just insanely powerful. He also does have a Scroll of Power, which is nice, and a Scroll of Leeching, which is also a really nice item if you're facing a heavy magic faction like the Vampires. So yeah, what matchups do I think Sarthorael is the best in? Well, against the High Elves, because they have magic armor-piercing missiles. And they also have high armor, so the Plague of Rust comes into handy. Beastmen, Kolek has an argument here. The anti-large AP might be better since you typically don't face a lot of missile play or a lot of magic single target play in this matchup. So I definitely think Kolek is probably the way to go against the Beastman. But Big Bird's not bad here, certainly. Bretonia probably would go with someone else. Kolek, again, very good in this matchup. And actually Archaon can be decent here as well. Lorifire's not too bad to help counter Grail Knights, gives you that magic damage. But yeah, Big Bird, again, not bad here, certainly. Against the Dwarfs, he's definitely a good pick. I think he's probably the most competitive because he's going to be mostly immune to their missile play. And he also has Plague of Rust, which again, just great value here. Skaven, he's again probably going to be the best because he's pretty much immune to Warp Lightning Cannons. The Plague of Rust can really help take down things like Storm Vermin and Doom Wheels, for example. Plague Furnaces, that sort of thing. Skaven do tend to take some armor. And yeah, the other cheap spells, the Searing Doom, can generate a lot of value as well. Let's see. Against the Tomb Kings, you know, with how the Tomb Kings are right now, with their very strong missile options, I might say that Big Bird's the best here. Kolek and even Archaon, to a degree, have an argument to be made here as well. But that's one I'm going to pass on. I'm not sure who's the most competitive there. But Dark Elves, certainly, like I said, I think he's the most competitive here because he's not going to get torn up by things like Dark Shards or, you know, the Dark Riders with crossbows, things like that, bolt throwers and so on. Against the Lizard Men, you probably want to go with Kolek to help take down dinos. Empire, I think Big Bird is also a really good pick here. Again, almost immune to missiles. The Plague of Rust is really good at singling out the few high armor, high value units that the Empire is going to bring. They typically don't bring all high armor, but like, you know, obviously you don't want to use Plague of Rust on state troops, but like Reiksguard or their Lord, or, you know, if they happen to bring some great swords or something, Searing Doom is going to be great against handgunners, and Big Bird's just going to be super hard for the Empire to pin down. Let's see. Vampires, yeah, he's probably one of the most competitive. Lore of Fire is pretty good here, but his magic resistance makes him resistant to spirit leeching and things like that. The Plague of Rust can also be decent as well, and of course he's unbreakable, so he won't get scared by the spooky vampires. But there are some other... Kolek's pretty good at this, and Archaon is also pretty good. Chaos Lord on a Dragon can even be pretty decent in this matchup, if a little risky. But let's see. Norska, Kolek, or Archaon, again, probably the more competitive picks in this matchup, although Big Bird's, again, not bad, certainly. Let's see. Greenskins, I would say Big Bird is a totally viable and strong pick, if not the best pick, simply because Greenskins also have a very strong missile force. They can sunder your armor and use their quote-unquote non-AP, even though Orc Boys actually have quite good AP values. They can use them to focus fire large targets, so Big Bird, you know, relatively immune to that. I do think he is going to be good here. Of course, the Fear and Terror is also very strong as well. And yeah, is that pretty much everything? I think I've covered everything. Oh yeah, Wood Elves, of course. Wood Elves are, yeah, enough said about them. Missiles, yes. Bring Big Bird, yes. Many times, yes. And also, a lot of his spells are pretty good against the high-value, low-armor stuff that the Wood Elves can bring, particularly Searing Doom against things like War Dancers, Way Watchers, things like that. Searing Doom generates huge value. So, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts about Big Bird, the true Everchosen of multiplayer at the very least. Unfortunately, not playable in campaign without mods, but still, very cool character, and I'm glad we have a Greater Demon in the game to have a lot of fun with. And yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. How do you feel about Big Bird? Do you use him often, or what Chaos Lord do you prefer if you don't use him? Do you disagree with anything I've said here? Feel free to let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next time.